seconds, and then Instagram. Even though we're live on Facebook and LinkedIn and all that stuff right now. So what's up, everybody? We are actually waiting for Instagram as always.
Good old Insta-famous.
Here we go. Go live. All right. So now we're live on Instagram as well. Hey, everybody, it's James Corbett. It's just me today. Rocco couldn't make it. He's not feeling well, but he sends his condolences and his love to everybody. And we have with us today Christopher Whitman, who I have already had the pleasure of having a very long conversation with today, pre-episode, which is why we're 46 minutes late on going live, but it's totally worth it. I am very motivated to jump back into this. I'm back from Ireland. That's why we missed last week. I was in Ireland. I took a vacation, the first one, and I can't even tell you, I think like 6 years or something like that. I don't even know, maybe 5. And just been focused on building Refit, helping people out for so long. I needed to take a little step back and think, and actually not even think. I turned my brain off and just enjoyed Ireland, and it was amazing. So taking time for yourself is important. Took my own advice and I did it. And I'm super grateful that I did. I'm a little slow on the comeback, but that's all right. So we also have Jeff today with us. This is actually Jeff wanted Chris to come on. I believe, Jeff, Chris was your leader, correct?
Yep, he was my platoon sergeant out in Afghanistan.
That's fantastic. Chris,
Yeah.
Jeff speaks very highly of you.
Thank you.
And, I can see why, actually, just from our 45-minute conversation we just had. You absolutely have you actually taught me something that I really like a lot. And it made me think of something when we're talking about the welfare and your morale. And the difference between, I guess it was actually morale and what was the other M?
Welfare is it. So
was it welfare? Okay. So
yeah.
It's welfare and morale. And the way you described that was actually fantastic. I learned even from a management perspective in my own mind for running something like Refit. I try to explain to people a lot like, hey, listen, when you're volunteering with us, we're going to have you do the boring shit, right? I call it eating the frog or whatever. Like, you're going to have to do the boring shit to be able to do the fun shit too. And like, that's how we're going to bring in more money here. It's not always fun. It's doing things that suck, that actually push this whole organization forward. Right. I don't like doing paperwork. I have to do a ton of it. I have to sign a document today. I have to read through a 60-page document and then sign it. Actually, that's what's coming after this. But that and finishing up the financials and everything. But nonetheless, those things are super important to move stuff forward. But also going on retreats and talking to guys and having fires, the morale building shit's also just as important. But you need to have the first one to be able to have the second. So that's why there is a bit of a leveling where the welfare is more important than the morale, inside of a leadership or management perspective mind. So thank you for that. That was fantastic. Nonetheless, Jeff, why don't you go ahead, give a small introduction from what you know about Chris, and Chris will dive right in and start talking about your story and some of your experiences. And the goal of this podcast, I really want to bring it back for this episode, it is named FML, which usually means Fuck My Life, but in this case, it means For My Life. And I really want us to get to a point today in our episode where we have you tell us the moment you really realize, if you ever struggled with mental health or anything like that, I want you to be open and vulnerable today. And I think you're going to be able to be capable of it and explain it in a very powerful way. Because again, I have high feelings for the way you communicate. So I have a feeling you're going to be able to give a good advice, but explain to us how you went from being Fuck My Life to For My Life. And we'll get to that point towards the end. And I will remind you of that. And there is no time limit. We usually go for an hour. That is like the minimum, but if we go over it, we go over it. So let's have a great conversation today and rock on. Go ahead, Jeff, introduce him.
What's up, everybody? I am Jeff. My name is Jeff, the Tom Brady lover, yada, yada, yada. So today I decided to bring on my old platoon sergeant. I still slip up and call him Staff Sergeant Whitman. Because that's still embedded in me, but I get to see him pick up the ranks. When I get out, he was a gunny, and recently I just went out to California to watch him retire from the Marine Corps as a sergeant major. he is the one that has instilled a lot of the core values which a true leader does. And that's why I wanted to bring Chris on, because, you know, he's done it all. You know, he was from my standpoint as a, you know, private in the Marine Corps, watching him come to a line unit. I know he's had some experiences before, but just watching him grow from the training point to the combat point, you know, and I keep giving him shit. And I'm like, man, all the time he had us fucking training. But look, a lot of us came home.
Yeah.
And that is the one thing that I am so thankful for. And I just want to know with you, Chris, is how the fuck have you been since 2012 when the last time I saw you, you know, like when we were both Marines. Like
Yeah.
I can only imagine what the fuck you've done.
I appreciate that, Jeff. And so I think it was 4 total years that Jeff and I got to work together. Late 2008 through 2012. I'm Chris, by the way. So this is my first time doing something like this. I appreciate your patience. If we're going to really focus on the mental health side about it, why is it for my life and not the other way around? And Jeff's question is, what have you been doing? Because in essence, what I think I hear Jeff asking is, we come from uber violence, absolute chaos, and now we're today. How are you not in a ward? Or worse, in the ground, right? Which is unfortunately how many of our people have ended up. So it makes you think about a few things. And James, prior to going live here, we did talk about that welfare versus morale conversation. And we talked also about ethics versus morals and values, and how organizations have ethics and people have morals and values, and how do you reconcile the difference? To me, it's been wild. It's been an experience that makes you question a lot of things when other people suffer and you don't, or when people aren't suffering and you are, right? Because earlier, James, in our conversation, we discussed the idea of the individual has a ton to say in their own travel, right? Their own trip and where they are in this thing. And so a couple of brief stories about humanity. A gentleman we've served with, whom I respect to this day, he's still around and he still does really good things. I didn't realize this happened. A lot of times in war, you don't remember things the same way somebody else does. This gentleman's name is Travis Anderson. He lives in Iowa. He was a mortarman for me in 2010 in Afghanistan. And at some point we were under fire and he wasn't moving. Not wasn't moving like I thought he was dead. He just wasn't progressing in the gunfight. And so I ran to him and said, die here or die with me. Let's go. Or something similar. But basically I said, let's fucking go. It's time to go. I didn't remember saying that. According to him, later that night, he's on post behind the machine gun. Probably the most important thing you can have is trustworthy security. And he's pretty upset with himself. And in his words, he's like in tears behind the machine gun, thinking he failed us. Right? Like thinking that he failed. Before we went live, James, you also mentioned natural human tendencies.
Yes.
What's the reality of human? Because you can't, just because you need to go to war doesn't mean you can just forget what humans naturally are, which is their instinct to survive. Right.
That's exactly right.
So I basically told him, in his words, I told him, hey, at least you're still human. Right. I don't remember that either, but it comes back to a few things about recovery, mental health, etc. I didn't know I said any of that until about 9 years later at the funeral for one of our guys who killed themselves. So, and it was the first funeral I had gone to for a suicide, because I had conflicting emotional and moral values about suicide. at the time. So he's telling me this, and we're in some hotel lounge downstairs, and he's telling me this, and I'll come back around to why he told me this, but I found that shocking. So the first thing is like when it comes to the idea of mental health, the experience of a traumatic event is different amongst each person. So let's just say we're in a gunfight and a lot of terrible stuff happens, or we're in a car accident together, or we witness an assault on a woman or a man that's particularly violent and we witness that together, or we act or we don't act on that assault. Like we talked about earlier, James, with you and that young lady that was assaulted in a bar, and you did something, you took action. Well, action and inaction, it's the same event, but we wear the pain differently. And I want to say amongst the small team of people, I think it was approximately 170 or so people, 9 from that group have killed themselves just in the last 10 years. And I don't have any problems with those events. I don't struggle. I don't lose sleep. I'm not frustrated. I'm not concerned. I'm sad for the loss of people at war, and I'm sad for the loss of people after, but it doesn't like keep me awake, and I don't have nightmares. I never have. So the first thing about this whole process is like, was it traumatic or not? Or am I fucked up for not feeling bad? Right? And like, you have these internal struggles of, we experience this thing. Am I fucked up for not feeling bad? Gavin Brummond died June 10th, 2010. Like, that's my guy. But like, I don't frequently reach back into my brain thinking how terrible that moment was. I just miss him and remember him, and it makes me sad, and I have feelings about it, but I don't struggle with all that violence. And I think it makes you like kind of wonder why. And at some points when you don't, I tell Travis Anderson in the middle of a field to get the fuck up and keep moving, or you're going to die here. Come with me. You can die with me. That is an abnormal, unnatural reaction. His reaction was normal and human and reasonable and frankly acceptable. And when you talk about violence and stuff like this, it's natural, like piss and shit yourself. That happens. It's okay. I've urinated on myself in combat for sure. And like, you don't always have control of what your body does to such unnatural things, But afterwards, I hear the story from Travis where I tell him he's human. Well, what am I if I don't feel it? What am I if I don't? And I don't want to be too arrogant about it, but I did not experience any of those pauses. I didn't experience a single one of those pauses. And was frankly extremely comfortable being extremely aggressive and extremely violent in those moments, even though I'm extremely peaceful otherwise. And I wasn't raised violent. I didn't fight as a kid. I didn't have guns in the house. My mother was extremely rigid about her beliefs and values and expectations of us. And it was really wonderful. I just never experienced any of those things. I had seen some violence, and I had watched people I care about suffer, and those things now start to draw to the mental health part. Like, why would I not feel human in those moments or have human responses? And I think when we get to like, what's for my life, like those experiences I had as a child, watching good human beings suffer at the hands of others and watching good human beings stop that suffering, built my ethical baseline, my moral baseline, which is to take action.
Can I want to ask a quick question, because you said it a couple of times. Why do you feel like, and I want to make this very clear too, and make sure everybody who is listening, who does listen, that the violence that you were committing, why do you find, or, I want to make this clear, that you're not sounding arrogant at all. Not
Thanks.
having that reaction. There's no arrogance behind that. some people like, oh, he thinks he's badass. Don't worry about what other people are thinking. That's not happening here. That's not how we roll here. Like, you just experienced those things, and you just responded in the way that you responded. And by the way, here's the question: why are you saying that you're that the almost the lack of fear was not natural? Because also what I know about you, just to make everybody make sure everybody knows, we did have a long conversation before this. Jeff brought up how Chris was very disciplined about training and about doing things and about constantly being ready, right? And pushing his men to do that and setting that standard. So why are you diminishing your own training that you did in your own discipline for yourself so that you would not respond that way? Why are you calling that unnatural when in reality it's very natural? It's what you prepared for. And violence, by the way, is arguably just as natural as sex and giving birth and love, by the way, because look at planet Earth. Violence and killing is happening all over in the animal kingdom, and we are animals. We're literate creatures. We use words. So why are you saying it's unnatural? I'm curious.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question and a good segue into the morale and welfare thing, right? So, I did experience fractional moments of fear that were immediately overcome by instinctual response from training. So now we come back to the morale and welfare question. It's not that anybody was necessarily untrained, so they experienced the human value of fear. I'm looking at a book on my bookshelf called The Gift of Fear, where this guy, Gavin DeBecker, discusses how fear itself is the right kind of motivator when it's used as a positive stress instead of a negative stress, right? And I think all stress only becomes positive, especially when it's based on fear, if you have a skill built to manage that catalyst, right? So if the stress is
fantastic,
someone raising a fist, if you are trained to deal with that fear, then it becomes a positive thing, and your fear is overcome by instinct and valuable training, right? So a human response to this other human's catalyst, if trained well, becomes a positive, maybe not for the person who's initiating violence, because I'll end them, right? But that fear creates in me the appropriate response. I believe that we were trained so exceptionally well that fear was just enough to get my body excited, orient me, and then act. It was only that way because I was ruthlessly trained. I happen to have more experience. I was 10 years older than Jeff in service at the time. I had already deployed to Iraq or Afghanistan 3 other times besides that, before that. So I had already had some experience. But just so ruthlessly trained that the fear was overcome by response, right? And that's what we want. We want to build response.
That's exactly right.
Fear response is to petrify, crumble, or submit, right? Which is fine. There's another offering from Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman called On Killing and On Combat, which is the psychology associated with the natural violence that occurs in conflict, which talks a lot about what you did, James. Like, violence is natural, just as natural as anything else in the animal kingdom. That's true, but we can't always sleep with it. And so now we come back to me feeling uncomfortable that I didn't experience those same stutter steps or aftermath. I didn't.
Now let me pause real quick. Do you think that because you did not pause, that it came from, again, I think you already said it, but I just want to really hit it because I think you actually need to hear this too and know this. Do you think it came from that discipline of training?
Yeah. So combo platter here. This is where we get into what was and then what is. Fantastic. The discipline and training made the event go well. One time we caught the guy that killed our Marine. I don't remember the guy's name. He was a Taliban dude. He also sent my dog handler, one of my squad leaders, one of my very best team leaders, and a linguist home with destroyed bodies. There's directional force charge is a version of an IED that acts like a claymore, and we had a lot of people go down in one time. I think we had 5 or 6 casualties if you include the dog in the span of a 2-second explosion, and we lost a lot of folks to this guy. And then he eventually moved to another main supply route for the Taliban and killed one of my Marines, injured 2 of my Marines, killed an Afghan guy, and really did some damage to my team. We caught that guy. One of my Marines caught that guy trying to evade a checkpoint. A snap vehicle checkpoint. One of my guys caught him, and he ditched his bike and ran off into the middle of this field, and we got him, which is great news. My team brings this guy back, and I was not with them for this particular patrol. They bring him back, and I don't know the amount of time. I want to say it was 30 hours, but for 30 hours, I thought my Marines would murder him. Why not?
Mm-hmm.
Why not? And so I handpicked and stood watch for that 30 hours. I was not going to let Marines stand watch on this guy. They would kill him. And now we
knew where he was sitting.
Yeah,
we knew.
And so this is interesting because I've never heard the troops' perspective on this particular action at that time because they were so angry. Hey, Travis Anderson is on. Oh, that's really good news. I'm glad to hear that. But he was sobbing in there, he's crying. So already he's in suffering. But now we get to the before and after. Sure, we're trained well enough to do things. Well, we trained enemy prisoner of war and detainee handling. And one of them is to safeguard. But now you get into this place, well, ethically, morally, and with my values, those can all go out the window when I have vengeance in mind, which is also natural.
Yes, it is natural. And
right?
You have to have the response to control it.
To control it. And this is the stoicism you mentioned in our previous conversation, James, is the stoic ability to manage that deeply reasonable, not good, but reasonable desire to take justice.
That's right.
But in reality, justice is not formed based off our desires. It's formed off the hierarchy that's built, and there's policy stuff, right? So it was bad. It was very, very bad and very difficult. And the only thing that I could think of in my mind was they won't be able to sleep if they do it. And I had this conversation for a long time with a gentleman named Carl Quist. He was our platoon commander. He was a lieutenant. And we talked a lot about, like, we're going to be extremely violent, but I want them to sleep at the end. And if someone had killed this guy, a lot of people would have been pleased that he was gone because they would have felt like justice. But whoever did it would suffer forever.
So first and foremost, those kind of thoughts and actions that you're taking is the mark of, and I'm not blowing smoke up your ass. I do not suck other dicks or whatever you want to say. Genuinely, that is the mark of a great mind, thinker, and a disciplined, emotional person, right? Which is very important to note also that stoicism, very misunderstood. It is not a lack of emotions. It is actually the control of emotions. That is all. And that's normal. That's a normal, wonderful thing to practice.
And that control takes one word: discipline.
Yes.
My lady retired from the Marine Corps Friday. And
congratulations.
In her speech, she said, oh, yeah, thank you. In her speech, she said, discipline is freedom.
That's
right.
Discipline is freedom. And to take discipline, you have to have responsibility to actually practice discipline. So responsibility is freedom is what I say all the time.
Right.
Anyway, go ahead. Keep going.
The transitive property of all these incredible
values. That's exactly right, brother.
Equal liberty and freedom and space.
The First Amendment is the pathway to actual good mental health, by the way. Just want to say that too. I have a whole fucking argument for that, but keep going, please, please.
No, I very much appreciate that. So then if we tie all this stuff together that we've discussed so far, the training is incredible. The training is wonderful, but you can do all that training. Let's see, how do I say this? The average person that joined the Marine Corps or the service between September 12th, 2001, and I would venture to guess any time in 2010, it's extremely likely, especially if they were young or indoctrinated by hate, that their goal was vengeance for an attack. And therefore, you don't have people at war for policy, because we were just killing drug dealers. We were trying to fight terrorist funding by destroying the opportunity for the Taliban to grow poppy, opium, in Afghanistan. We were trying to get them to plant cotton instead. That was actually our primary function, was to destroy the drug trade, grow cotton, and remove the funding for terror activities. When you see that and you believe that, it makes it easier to fight that war, because the mission isn't to kill terrorists, it's to kill the money.
Let me ask a question about that.
Yeah.
So that's why you would have to sometimes protect poppy fields, because you're trying to get that guy to change from poppy to cotton.
Yes. And like
exactly
destroying the product wasn't a problem. Safeguarding the land was important, like all the infrastructure for irrigation,
right.
et cetera. Yes.
It's exactly right. Yep.
But if I'm one of those, and I joined prior to 2000, I joined prior to the attacks on 9/11. So my desire to come in wasn't like, you touched America, I'm going to come fuck you up. Unfortunately, that translates to an immature mind or a broken mind, as I have to kill Muslims. I mean, if I'm going to be extremely transparent,
yes, please.
There is not a small population that wanted to kill Muslims. Of American troops who would go overseas, and we would dehumanize the Muslim population in the name of killing extremists. You know, the word Haji is not derogatory. The word Haji is extremely respectable, but we turn it into this thing where it's like killing Hajis. Like, why would we kill the best of the Muslims? That's not what we're doing here. We're trying to eliminate terror and folks who are extreme. But that's not what the average 18-year-old mind, who is, we talked about naivete earlier too.
Yes.
Naivete is partnered with ignorance, not stupidity or malice. Just
I just don't knowing. Just don't know. So, ignorance, not knowing.
Yeah. Imagine taking an 18 to 21-year-old person, putting him in the middle of the desert or a lush farmland, which we were in the middle of, all green, and fight through 6-foot-tall poppy fields and 10-foot-tall pot plants, right? And you're trying to have this battle with folks, but the average young troop thinks they're killing Muslims, not stopping the drug trade. It's hard to get people to understand that, because their brain is still focused on why they joined, which was to vengeance. Yeah. So
I remember back at that time when we had that DEA guy come through, to show us like, hey, this is what we're doing.
Yeah. We had a couple of DEA folks roll with us for like the primary week of the initial incursion to Marj, Afghanistan, to kind of like point out what it is we're looking for and to begin the hierarchy so that they could go after their targets while we were trying to facilitate a change in the area. But that doesn't translate well to a 19-year-old who lost their dad in the towers.
Yep.
So now we talk about, what does that 19-year-old want to do when not only did he lose a family member or a fellow citizen, but now he also lost his brother in arms. And 6 other of his men have gone home missing body parts or really badly injured.
Yep.
And then you catch the guy that did it. That is a recipe for disaster, emotionally, psychologically. And it's completely natural, like you said, to want to end this guy's life for doing it to so many other people. Absolutely. But that's vigilante stuff.
That's right.
That's vigilante stuff. And vigilante stuff is fine unless you're the vigilante and you can't sleep at night.
Yep.
Right. And so now we get to the mental health part. I think, to boil it down for me, my suffering is minimized because my mother put good ethics into me. I went to the invasion of Iraq in 2003 and unfortunately killed some civilians in a completely innocent environment where we didn't understand cultural differences of stop or come here. And from a distance, we say stop, they say come here. We all said stop. They thought we said come here. And so I'm at a road checkpoint and I stopped them because they wouldn't stop themselves. And you learn all this stuff later. And like, I still don't suffer with that because ethically, my heart was pure in the application of violence.
That's
my
exactly
training was
right.
clean in the application of violence. And
That's
so,
right. It's an unfortunate thing that happened from a misunderstanding communication. And that's right. That's right.
And when you can accept,
I'm sorry you went through that, by the way, man. It's tough.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's tough.
For Jeff and I, our deployment, a young lieutenant killed 19 people because the bomb landed on the wrong side of the wall. You know, and it's like, I've talked with that guy a couple times in the last decade, and I think he still suffers with it, but he also accepts, like, that's sad, but I understand.
That's right. And that's a fine place to be in grief. That's avoiding the potential of ending your own life. If you have a true understanding of it's a very important phrase. They are not mutually exclusive, right? Like that. To understand mutual exclusivity is very important for the structure of that left and that right. We were talking the morals and the values. That's right.
Yeah. And so I appreciate the idea of having gone through that, experiencing that young, and then carrying into my time with Jeff and a really good team of other people. Like, I was fortunate enough to have good values from my mother and really good values from other service members who were not hateful. You know, they were extremely disciplined. They were extremely measured in their application of violence, measured lethality.
Yep.
But you know what? An example of that is one of our troops had a round ricochet through his neck. He was fine. We were very, very lucky. He walked back on his own. His weapon was destroyed, and he was just doing what he could to still help the fight while they tried to get out. This was the day after we lost our troop in the same area. Because we have discipline, we push people out to that area again and again, even though we know it's dangerous. Because you have to, because it's what you fucking do to win.
That's right.
And one of our guys got hurt the next day. Or it was that morning. Now I can't remember. But he did have a round ricochet through his neck, and he comes back, and I see him coming back, and he's all smiles. He's like, thank God I'm alive, right? Yep. And it was very funny. The gentleman named Terry Flogger. But in my expectations of discipline, every time we came back from a gunfight, I got round counts. How many rounds did you expend? And of what variety and kind?
Good man.
Nobody died, but we spent 3 times the ammo. That's a lack of discipline. We fired in anger. Right?
We were taught fire superiority.
Yeah. Yeah. And I appreciate that. But comparatively to other moments that were similar, the lengths of battle that were that long, we fired a lot more ammo. To me, that's an emotional that's a non-stoic physical response. Right? But I needed stoicism. And so I fucked up their squad leader. Like, hey man, control your troops firing. You may have fired that much, but you didn't know you were coming back to me. How do I get you more ammo? Be disciplined. Think about the longer pick. And like, these are things that I was obligated to do. I don't know who Wagner is, but I appreciate what he just said. Provide peace through excessive volume of fire. Good for you, man.
Wagner's great.
So I appreciate, I really appreciate that our emotions get involved there. And sometimes you feel like the lunatic who's like, hey man, why did you fire so much? You know, but isn't that what citizens ask of our cops every time they pull the trigger? Like, where's your discipline in your firing or whatever else? And those things all come back to ethics.
Well, to be fair, there is a stark difference, which makes law enforcement insanely difficult. I want to point 2 things out real quick. Yeah. One, that my mind is right now blown actually by something. And number 2, I want to describe something. So I'm going to start with number 2. So with law enforcement, when they do pull the trigger, you pull the trigger to kill. It's just leading up to that point of You don't want to do that. A lot of them don't sign up to do that. They don't want to. They want to provide peace. They want to help. They big hearts, right? And it's very difficult to take the life of an American citizen, a fellow American citizen, right? That's their job. That's insanely difficult. And that's a stark difference between the two roles. But they absolutely need to fire excessively to perform that piece, or to provide that peace, as Wagner was just pointing out. But and then that's a similarity. However, the difference is taking the life of the American citizen. It's a very challenging job, one of the hardest in the world.
I could not imagine.
And number one, exactly right. That's right. And number one point I wanted to bring up is, and just point out, really, I just want to point this out. What a great way to measure emotional discipline of the men firing. Actually, how did you, now pure curiosity here, how'd you come up with that? Is that like trained at a high level in the military, or is that like your thing that you realize? Because that's
I think it's discipline on the battlefield is mentioned frequently.
okay.
How an individual extends what equates as discipline is up to them. So I equated that as discipline, but I had an odd viewpoint because I was also obligated to get more ammo for you. And so if I'm in so many people's experience varies. You will talk to plenty of folks who served overseas. Without being cold to them, the majority served overseas in combat zones and maybe even saw combat. A large majority were at a larger area where they could kind of like freely acquire logistical support.
Sure.
You couldn't drive to us. You could not drive a vehicle to us. All of my logistics they got dropped in the middle of a soaking wet agricultural field at 3 a.m. And we had to go move all of our stuff in and out from this black net that got dropped off by a helicopter with everything from hand grenades to halal meals for my Afghan counterparts. So I had a different perspective, I think, than they did. So I could see, there's a comment that says, "Where's the dunnage photo?" And I had so much expended ammunition cartridges from explosives, especially, that we would take pictures of it because it's just wild. But for every one that gets shot, I need to get another one. So I think from a discipline perspective, it was something I saw differently from most.
Brilliant.
Which was lucky. And a peer of mine that ran another platoon.
That's not lucky, brother. That's intuition. That is ethics and morals, the things that your mother put into you. That is where that came from. Brilliant. Thank you. Keep going.
I'm really proud of some of that stuff.
You should be.
Our unit, our platoon was often and frequently utilized for the most chaotic things because they had the most trust for us. That trust was earned and paid for in the long hours, the hard work. And frankly, every lance corporal or specialist in the Army that complains about the work, their leader's doing something probably right. We don't want to say this, but Jeff says it now, and all those guys say it now. Like, I hated those moments.
A healthy mind says it now.
That's exactly right. Like in retrospect.
Yes.
I hated that you didn't give us time to do X, Y, Z. Well, no, but now you have time to do X, Y, Z because you still have a pulse.
That's exactly fucking right.
Right. And so I do think that the discipline thing, the ethics of it, and anytime I ever pulled the trigger or asked somebody or directed somebody to do it, there was never a time when I wasn't absolutely confident that it was the morally correct decision in that moment. Good. Afterwards, it may not have been.
Sure.
The civilians on some street in Nazaria, right? Which is unfortunate and sad and not good, but warranted and acceptable now. Because Correct. In the moment that it happened, it was the ethically appropriate choice. Then you can sleep okay with that.
That's exactly right.
But the folks that went to do those things because they had a vengeful mind, when they are healthy and they recognize the reality of their actions, how do you reconcile your hateful actions with goodness? You can't.
You cannot.
And I think that that's been a big struggle for the majority of veterans.
Well, let's not say you can't. Actually, I cannot agree. I don't want to agree with that. I think it takes a strong, it takes a lot of work to reconcile. I think it takes more work to reconcile. I think it is possible to reconcile with it, but it takes a lot of accountability to the actual hatefulness that you did have, and a lot of
it's not,
self-forgiveness.
to come to terms with it.
Yes.
To come to terms with it.
Yes.
And then survive after the fact. I agree with that.
Yep.
I don't think you'll ever be able to rationalize or justify. Maybe that's the word I should have used.
Fair.
You'll never be able to justify your actions.
That's fair.
But you may have to reconcile with your choices
and be accountable to it and move forward. That's
I appreciate that, James. That's a big distinction. I like that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for that. And I do think that that's necessary to give yourself grace and forgiveness.
Exactly.
I still don't have grace for myself.
Grace and forgiveness is the pathway to peace inside, dude. That's right.
Yeah. I would offer, if I struggle anywhere, and I have had this conversation with a few folks, my struggles, and I have sought mental health services and support starting in late 2019 and early 2020. But all of that was really associated with my relationships. All of that was associated with my relationships and I have a very, very truncated memory of my childhood. That my earliest memory I can even remember. I'm 8 years old. So like there's a lot of stuff that I am curious about in my world that led me to be whoever I am. And some of that protector nature is from watching my mother suffer, the man who came into her life to be the most wonderful man in my world, watching him extremely stoic. I'm under the impression, a young mind watched an event happen, and I'm under the impression after talking with my mom about it that my stepdad, my dad, he gave me his name. The name Whitman is my stepdad's name. He adopted me and he gave me that gift. Well, he also gave me the gift of still having my mom because she was being assaulted and someone was trying to kill her in our home. And my dad, when he was dating my mom, just happened to walk in to bring her food and hang out and saved her life in front of me. So my desire for stuff that's associated with therapy and mental health is all about, why do I have this undying desire to be a sheepdog? Why do I have this undying desire to serve and support and uplift? And I fail at it all the time. I especially fail at supporting other people in my life, supporting their safety and security sometimes, and supporting their welfare. And I don't call my mom enough. I don't tell her how thankful I am enough. Same thing with my dad. I have some siblings that I don't tell them enough how much it matters to me that I'm so much older than my siblings. My siblings were in elementary school when they get a phone call that I've been shot, And so and then I don't come home, which is like another thing for them. Like, why aren't you coming? Why are you staying there? Jeff and a couple other people in this thread, you really try to partner how to manage what to do. Like, you have this opportunity, you have this injury, you have this whatever. And like, do I go home? Do I stay? What am I supposed to do? Someone suffers for either choice. There are places where I've really not done and managed that well. I've gone to seek some counseling for those things. What have I done to fail my daughter's mother? What have I done to not support and build the relationship I need to with my ex-wife's family? With my ex-wife, with my daughter, with the men in my life that matter, because I don't keep good relationships. But when you boil those down and we start talking the mental health part, you mentioned the man that was next to you when you chose to stand up for that woman. And the only reason you stopped is because a competent mentor / teammate, companion, man next to you said, time to stop.
Yep.
And then you did what? You did.
Yep.
Right. That's an accountability partner. And now we get into addiction.
And I love that motherfucker for the rest of my life.
Yeah. And basically he's your anger sponsor.
Yep.
and that wasn't necessarily in anger. That was in defense.
Right. Yeah.
But like
I
that
know what you're
guy is
saying.
like, when your stoicism fails,
Mhm.
who are the pillars around you to hold you up?
Who's the community surrounding you? That's right.
Yeah.
And I want to point something out on that.
Please.
There's something very important to note. I mentioned to you earlier before this podcast, I mentioned it 2 weeks ago. My realization that the only thing that separates us in the animal kingdom from other animals is that we have words. We are literate creatures. So your community should be the community that has the words that they're feeding you. We eat words.
Yeah.
Our brain eats words. The entire world around us, we made up with words. It's all made up. So if you have positive words coming into your brain and in your world, you're going to have positive outcomes. If you have negative constantly coming into your life, you're going to have negative outcomes. Absolutely, the words matter most. So please continue.
Well, I appreciate that, because it's also under extreme duress.
Mm-hmm.
How do you find the words to make someone believe that everything they're going through is still valuable and worth it?
Yes.
We lose a troop, you come back. What's the average desire of someone who loses someone closest to them? To mourn. Like, it's extremely normal to want to put your head down and just say, I miss him.
Yep.
Like, even now, I want to see him.
Yep.
Or the other men who've taken their lives for whatever reason since then. Like, I want to see those people. I want to tell them thank you. I want to shake their hand. I want to give them a big hug. I want to whatever. You want to do those things. But as soon as they came back to me, we sent them back out. Hey, here's your new. One of my guys was, we had to give him some new clothes because he was covered in blood, and like, I had to inventory all of his stuff, which is all covered in blood, and his flak jacket was in shambles. There's holes the side of a master lock going through his rifle, and like, this is the nature of war, and this is what you do. And from the leader's perspective, like, well, now I have to inventory this stuff. This is the cold-hearted side where you forget about the human, because now we have to go through his stuff. And he's married. And I've got other troops going through his stuff before me to get certain things out of his gear for his wife separately. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so now I've got these young troops doing something, and like, sometimes I regret letting them do that. It was for their privacy, but sometimes I regret letting them do that, right? Because that is permanently embedded on them.
Mm-hmm.
That's something like, you absorb these responsibilities, but it's weird to immediately finish what you're doing and be like, hey, did you guys got your new camis? Are you reloaded? You got new water? Make sure you take a meal. Go brief the Afghan guys. You have 30 minutes to be outside again. You're patrolling again. Go. You're fucking leaving. Very unpopular.
I want to say both are normal. You thinking you regret it, good. You, in the moment, having them go through everything, have them experience it, and not protecting them from the realities of war,
right?
Good. Both are good. I would argue.
I think it does good things. They also felt a place of supporting her, the wife, back home, by doing this valuable thing to safeguard.
Happy you said it, because I was going to say it. Like, they were a part of the process. It is actually a part of mourning in a warrior way.
Right. Because there's not time to Jeff, do you remember? It had to have been like 3 weeks before we actually did a memorial for him.
Yeah. I just want to say something. What's really interesting is like actually hearing everything from your point of view, and then you have my point of view. I was under you, and I can honestly say, and you know me, I'm very, very open and honest with stuff.
Yeah.
The day after Brumman passed, well, when we got back, that walk that our squad had back to the patrol base, that was just the most emotional fucking walk for any of us, because we're carrying gear for Tyler, Terza, Brumman, that Afghan guy, And when we got back, it's like that's when the guys in the squad started doing what they did quickly. And we were still trying to really just wrap our heads around it. And we didn't really know what mourning was because we were still young.
Oh, that's powerful.
But
mourning is anger when you're a warrior.
Yes. So we just became fucking mad. I watched two people do CPR.
That's a part of the mourning process. Anger, 100%.
And I remember the conversations. Well, I remember Bewley. Hey, Brumman, I remember the boat we're gonna get you. We're gonna get that boat. Blah blah blah. And then everything was just fucking chaos. And I just remember these conversations. The walk back when we got to the patrol base. Fucking, we were all sitting in the smoke pit, and that's when we got the news that Brumman didn't make it. And I think I look back at it now, for us to stay mission focused, we were able to we needed to keep our mind busy, our mind occupied, but that turned into the high round expenditures because we were fucking pissed, because we knew at fucking 6 o'clock we were going to get shot at. We're pissed because we're eating. We don't want to throw on our fucking flak jacket. And the war is very fucking emotional, man. It fucks with every sense that we have.
Yes.
And, we're tired for post. We're tired for patrolling the heat, trying to stay hydrated. And, and obviously we're going to blame leadership for this, because we need someone to fucking blame, right? And so I just feel like, after the whole Brumman thing and just, everything it turned into straight up anger, It's like we weren't even focused on what the mission was, which was to push the Taliban out and stop the drugs. It was kill whoever the fuck was shooting at us. So,
did you feel that way for the rest of the deployment, Jeff?
Do
you remember?
The rest of that deployment, I felt like it just needed to end.
Okay.
So, and you guys put that fucking saying right on the fucking wall: complacency kills. That shit pissed us off. I know it pissed me off the more as time went on, for the simple fact that, like, we were there for the mission. We cared for the fight. We loved the firefights because it was the only time we felt alive and woke up.
Yeah.
But did I really care anymore about stepping on an IED? No. We just wanted to fucking put up a body count.
Yeah. And this is where we snap back to this idea of the vengeful mind does not sleep well at night. No. It's Jeff and James, both of you, there's one thing I never said properly until later, but I always knew and practiced. At least in the Marine Corps, there's this book, War Fighting. It's our primary doctrinal document about how we manage war. And one of them is the use of resources. And Jeff, this is going to feel a little uncomfortable. I never said it to you, but we always treated you guys this way. Mm-hmm. There was still compassion and love and care for you, but troops, including me, are a resource.
Yeah.
And one thing that I stopped doing after that deployment was I stopped telling my subordinate leaders that their job was to get everybody home. We really screw up because now we're going to come back to managing failure as a leader at war. Right? Yeah. So this is something that is not said enough.
Holy shit.
Yeah. What is your actual purpose? It is not my job to bring you home. And this is something, I've really struggled with this. I felt this way during the deployment, not beforehand.
What a truth. Oh my God.
I felt this way during the deployment and then have really tried to be an echo chamber for this going forward.
Oh my God.
I believe one of the places we suffer most is we make ourselves believe that our obligation is to bring everybody home with a pulse. That's not true. But we say it. And we tell young leaders that, get everybody home, get everybody home, get everybody home. And so what happens when you
Talk
don't
about
bring everybody
management
home?
of failure.
You're a failure. So you're guaranteeing failure. I really think we don't do that right. And I believe everything in mental health is prevention, frankly. Okay. So good ethical boundaries, expectation management, discipline, training, application of violence, ethical choices, and you're going to sleep fine at night.
I cannot agree more.
Yeah. The problem is the thing that's not talked about with mental health is your grace for yourself in failure.
Yes,
which is
that's everything. Oh my God.
Yeah. And so now you go overseas.
Statement protects that from the rip. Dude,
Yeah.
you got to write. Listen, to write is to fight. I say that shit to so many fucking guys. You have to write a fucking book that is, even if it's 10 pages long, and put that bitch out, dude. And you need to title it, stop telling everyone, or stop telling our soldiers, or stop telling our Marines that
survival is not the mission.
Home.
Survival is not the mission.
Holy
if that were
shit.
your job, I wouldn't send you.
Unbelievable.
If it was your job to bring everybody home, why would I fucking send you?
Unbelievable.
And you got to remember too, we joined, we joined the infantry at 18 years old, knowing that we could die.
Yeah.
So, Jeff, I love you to death. I believe that that's why you did it. I will tell you, even right now, knowing I could die, I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
So, like, God bless everyone who says, I'm willing to sacrifice. I had a really good commander who was not an infantryman once, and he said, said to me, the person who dies at war doesn't sacrifice anything their family does. So it's like, when you say you're willing to die, in essence, that means you're willing to have peace. When I'm gone, I will have peace. Right? So there's this weird thing when we're young, we say
you're avoiding the suffering.
Yeah, it's like, I'm willing to sacrifice and suffer now for freedom. We'll just say freedom as an idea. But in reality, I didn't know what that really meant. Like, I didn't.
Yeah.
I knew that people are a resource, like my ammunition is a resource, and my water is a resource, and my trucks are resources and fuel. And I was comfortable, and I don't think any of you guys realize this of Carl Quist and I. Loving all of you completely, we were comfortable with loss. I was comfortable with loss. Kill the enemy, destroy the drug trade. What's that, James?
It makes the most sense. Jeff said it makes sense. I said it makes the most sense.
But it doesn't make sense when you are the resource yourself.
And
it doesn't help when leaders tell subordinate leaders that you must get your people home, get your people home, get your people home.
Wait, I have a question. I have a very important question with this. You just said it doesn't make sense when you are the resource yourself. Do you actually mean that? Or are you trying to say something else? Because I don't think you mean that. I don't think you mean that doesn't make sense.
Naturally, it doesn't make sense that I have to die for someone else's purpose. Especially if I don't ethically believe you. Okay. And a lot of people enter service for the GI Bill, not the suffering.
Okay.
So the average troop who is the resource doesn't believe they're a resource because they're, and we'll go back to our conversation before this.
Get it now.
Yeah.
Very good. Keep going.
Yeah. And so when America is individual centric, why am I your resource to accomplish your task at my expense? The average person will naturally believe that.
Why the true sacrifice, those who sign up to truly sacrifice themselves
and for
other people to have that liberty and freedom is the greatest gift. It is actually, it goes back to something I was talking to somebody about a couple of weeks ago, which is this nation. It's not a Christian nation necessarily, but it was founded on Christian values, which is why even in Christianity, in the Bible, it says the greatest sacrifice is the one where you give your life up for another.
Right. And there's no question that that's what you've signed up to do, but that doesn't mean that everyone who signed up is willing, because the naivete, ignorance, and youth. Yeah. I don't actually understand what it means for me to say, for all these people, by the way, we didn't fight in Afghanistan for Americans. We did, but in reality, I vividly remember looking at local Afghan folks, telling them, I'm sorry the Taliban is here. We'll try to get your freedoms back. Because the Taliban murders kids and to get their
Murders,
way with adults.
rapes.
So I'm just, you don't ever really deploy in service to other countries and feel like you're dying for your own people. You feel like you're dying for people who don't care about their area, right? Which is a whole other complex that it creates.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. But in reality, one of the greatest things we can do, and I guess if I were to sum up my expectation management for why it's okay for me and I can sleep at night, I knew that humans were expendable as long as there was a mission that and a valid risk. They're not expendable for no reason. What will you risk for the mission? I will risk 25% casualties for this result. That is, we don't tell young leaders that, but that's how strategic leaders think. What number of human beings am I?
True.
I think that the United States is willing to risk the entire United States Marine Corps for 30 days in the next war if they had to make room for the Army to do hard stuff. I really believe that. I believe that real decision makers who understand resources know that humans are resources, and the expenditure of an entire division of a service is a worthy risk to get the upper hand. Why don't we think like that as a young person? Because we're not strategic, we're not qualified, and we're told to bring everyone home.
We're also, by the way, I don't know if it's a qualified question. I have a whole thing about that. I'm not going to get into it here, but it's a question of what we're taught. It's a question of individual skill sets. You blew my fucking mind with that statement. That is such because it's a great and powerful statement that actually it doesn't dehumanize. It's just realistic. It's actual truth. That's the truth.
Well, we send a lot of people to war who don't know what war is.
Yeah, man.
But we don't give them the perspective required, or, and this is going to be a little bit like probably more realistic, we don't have the appropriate number of leaders that are equipped to message that.
That's right.
We also don't have subordinate leaders who can submit their own opinion to say, so for instance, before we went live, Jeff talked about his squad leader, Jacob Gray, who is extremely capable warrior. And Jeff said, yeah, Sergeant Gray would come and say, yeah, old Whitman wants us to do such and such. A completely capable sergeant still didn't assume full responsibility and blamed someone else for something he didn't want to do, which is completely normal. Completely normal.
So normal.
But it's really hard for people to say, hey, this guy who's responsible, I don't agree with him, but I will submit my feelings to the reality and the mission.
To train resources?
This will be probably pretty conflicting for a lot of people.
Hit it, dude.
If you are extremely religious, especially Christian religion, people submit to the head of household and the head of household submits to God. Yes?
Yeah.
Right? Well, I have to submit to the head of the household, which is the commander. And if I think I'm right and the commander's not, my men will die. And they will do it thinking that I'm right because I disagreed with the commander, and they trust me because I'm the person they see. It's really, really bad. And so
that's the constant struggle with leadership and wanting people to like you, and that is one of the more natural human things is, does this person like me or not? Because our society, because it's all about words. What words am I using? Do people like me? Do they approve of me? Right? Like,
and what's the reply to me?
Yeah.
What's my benefit? Because the troops did not like me. They did not like me. I will tell you, and I think it's the same way for my child. I don't care if she doesn't like me. When she's 25 years old and she's successful, I'll get a phone call from her telling me why she's successful. When she is older and she has lived through some pain, she'll remember the things that were the most influential and the expectations that I had for her. And she'll call back and say, I'm sorry that I was rude to you or whatever. I do it to my mom all the time. Like, I'm only here because of the things she gave me.
Damn right.
Well, troops are the same way. And they
That's
will
right.
hate you in the moment that you apply discipline and that you leverage accountability and you remind them about responsibility. But I think they only respect the people who say, I'm telling you this, not the boss. I'm telling you this is what we're going to do. This is how it's going to go. And these are my expectation management for the next thing. Even if I don't agree, because the boss is the boss. What they don't get to see is I already told the boss my opinion like 40 times.
That's right. Yeah.
And he accepts it or he doesn't accept it. Or he tells me outright, we don't have time, which is another thing people aren't interested in. Everybody thinks they have to be able to say what they want instead of just shutting up and doing it. When you are able to find that balance, you apply your morals and values, but you still use your business ethics. You submit to the mission and the leader, but you keep your morality. When you do those things, you'll sleep at night. When you don't do those things, you have to come to terms with, not reconcile. I appreciate what you said. We can reconcile and be healthy later.
Yep.
But you have to come to terms with the idea that you didn't submit, or that you took an action in anger instead of morality, or that something happened to you and you blame the planet and say it was only me, or you actually take a moment to recognize that these things happen and you're going to be okay.
That's right.
I think that that's a big deal. If I come back to that morale welfare thing, if you really believe that, then you can get away from the idea that Jeff didn't like me in 2010. Okay, Jeff, your happiness is not important to me. I do not give a shit if you have a giant fucking smile on your face. Because, and this is a quote I'll never forget, let no angel tell you, if only I had been trained. Which means, let no dead human being, let no dead troop come back to you and say, I'd still be here if you had taught me X.
Oh, wow.
So, okay, cool. You got 20 more minutes on your fucking Xbox today? Well, I'm glad that platoon got 20 more minutes on your Xbox because you did 2 more hours of reload drills. And I made you run every single step in Camp Lejeune and every single barracks. And I made them go up and down. And we ran, and because we don't have any hills in North Carolina, but we ran and ran and ran and ran. And fuck Jeff and all of his friends, because now their legs are stronger.
Yep.
Damn right.
And Jeff will tell you, our platoon would do things harder than most, longer than most.
Good.
And we had quite a few casualties, but we came back okay.
Yep.
Right.
And more critically, Lieutenant Quist, our commander at the time, was the most successful platoon commander at accomplishing the mission. That's the measure. Not how many people made it home. That doesn't matter. It's, did you win? And Lieutenant Quist won.
Yep.
There was a price on his head. He was doing so good that he had a price on his head from the Taliban, local Taliban. So, like, you know, whoever is gone, whoever doesn't make it, I'm glad you had less McDonald's and more fighting back in the United States. And that, I think, adds to your mental health, survivability, and rationalizing all the terrible things you had to do.
Absolutely.
They were necessary.
So, James, real quick. So, like you said, I really disliked him for a very, very, very long time. I mean, this is post-military, you know.
Up until
met
probably
him in
5 years ago.
Yeah, you know, and I mean, I would get drunk, send him some fucked up things, you know, calling him a dickhead, stuff like that. I mean, this rivalry that we had then, it never fucking ended, and he he put up with it. And you know, for me, last year to you know, go to his retirement, you know, and see him for the first time since 2012. That for me closed a chapter, you know, for me to move forward. And, you know, because I look back at everything we've done, and I even said to him, I'm like, thank you.
Yeah.
You know, because now I fucking get it. You know, I got out of the Marine Corps at 22. I'm 35 years old now. And I just got it, 2 years ago. And that's what I'm so fucking thankful for, because, and now the great thing is I'm a fucking sergeant major in the civilian world and he's a boot. So
Dude, real quick, something I'm absolutely just there is something to be said about the I don't give a shit whether they like me or not is
Yeah.
actually the greatest sign that you give the most shit.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
And
Because I want to temper my actions for your feelings. And
it is,
parents do this all the time,
yeah.
and it crushes their kids' potential.
I also want to say that the giving of the most shit, you knew that.
Yeah.
You knew that. And when Jeff is sending you fucked up things, you're not taking offense. Hang on. I'm being very serious right now. Like,
Yeah.
you weren't taking offense, which because you knew your actions were justified. Because I imagine, actually, I feel like I have a good pulse on who you are as a person, how you actually respond to those messages. I have a question. Did you at one point say to yourself, like, at least he's alive to send me this shit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, every single. Well, James, a phone call at 3 a.m. from you is better than the phone call from someone else at 8 a.m. reading me your obituary.
Right. Yep. Yep.
And so it's the same principle. I would rather have your perceived hatred and frustration and anger
Yep.
and whatever the thing you're living in, give
Yep.
me. At least you're here to give it, right?
Yes.
For sure. There's no question there.
I wish, and not wish, I hope for most people that they recognize the power of self confidence in the appropriate utilization of a disciplinary action.
Yeah,
I mean,
they don't.
and disciplinary isn't hitting or like correcting.
Action.
Discipline action. Exactly. There,
They don't, because the payoff is 10 years long.
yeah, and it hurts along the way. Suffering is the pathway to peace. I mean, that is just fucking reality. That's
to be clear, though, Jeff got a 10 years worth of development version of me.
Yeah.
And I really fucked it up before Jeff.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And I fucked it up with Jeff. And I fucked it up. I was a sergeant in Iraq one time, and I looked at someone and said, because I didn't have the skill set necessary to give real leadership when I was angry, and my stoicism was out the window in this particular case. And I looked at another man with a rifle in the desert during operations, and I just said, shut the fuck up. And he wouldn't. I said, okay, sit down. And this is not a joke, and I've told this story before. I'm so embarrassed by it. I told him to sit down like a dog. And at some point, I got so lost in my authority that I didn't stop. And I was like, you're going to fucking do it or we're not moving. That's the worst. We weren't in an active gunfight, but we were absolutely on the patrol.
Right.
And I had this strange desire to impose my will. Jeff didn't get that version of me because I had already fucked that up so bad.
Yeah.
I blamed a lieutenant who told me I was a mortarman originally, which is a high angle of fire weapon.
Mm-hmm.
And the weapon fires into the same elevation zone as rotor wing aircraft. One of my Marines, this is before my time with Jeff, one of my Marines lost his thumb fortunately, just his thumb to an RPG. And I saw the shooter. And so I got my team. I had 3 mortars with 9 people. I got them set up to engage this target. And the lieutenant wouldn't let me. And again, under fire, I yelled to the lieutenant, guns are up, I'm ready. Let me go. Let me do it. He said no again. And like a fucking bitch, I said, fine, fuck it. And out of action is how you close down that mission. So I yell out of action to my team leaders. My team leaders bust down the weapons and they return to being riflemen. And I'm like angry and furious. And my guys wanted to shoot because they wanted vengeance. Right? My guys wanted to attack because they wanted to take specific direct action against an enemy who hurt us.
Mm-hmm.
Hours later, I'm up on the rooftop with this same lieutenant, and my Marines are all in security. They all think I'm right because they wanted to shoot, and so did I. All he says to me is, aircraft were inbound. All he said to me. That may not mean much to many people, but if I had pulled that trigger or had my troops fire their rounds, I would have impeded airspace because I had no fucking perspective.
That's right.
I had no holistic. My lady loves it when I say holistic. So I'm like, I had no holistic understanding of the battlefield because I was young, and vengeful. I didn't think about the mission. I thought about me. And I never it wasn't until way after service that I told any of those young guys that the lieutenant was right.
Damn.
And that has been, all of that had to happen before I could look at Jeff Gray and not care how he felt about me.
That's right.
I had to fuck that up for 10 years to get so self-aware and self-confident. I was fucked up in a bunch of other places, but on the battlefield, I was unstoppable. Right? And that was a place where I had total self-confidence built by wisdom, which is only gained through suffering. So I made enough mistakes to have the wisdom and the support from my commander to be that thing.
Unreal.
But it takes all that to get there. It's wild how we have 25-year-olds leading 40 18-year-olds. And it's hard lessons are learned and people die just to learn lessons too. Yeah. That's a worthy risk also. So, man, Jeff, I appreciate what you're saying. We just saw the world so differently because of our time and our position. It's cool to talk like this with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is, I would imagine, a struggle for a young, testosterone-filled, infantryman who wants to just fucking obliterate. But you have to have the cooler head prevail because just those words, aircraft were inbound. Yeah. Just those words alone. Like, that means that guy did not give a fuck if you wanted to shoot or not. He didn't give a fuck if you threw a little temper tantrum out of action and that whole shit.
And I did. Like, it was so immature. It was so bad.
Right. But it was a great learning experience for you later. And he knew that, and all he had to say to you was those words, because he also trusted that you weren't some fucking schlup idiot who was gonna not understand. You immediately understood, right?
That was
that was a wonderful learning experience, and thank goodness there was a person with a cooler head that was knew what was happening, and that's difficult too in leadership as well. From his perspective, he can't explain to you why in the middle of a fucking firefight, right? And even sometimes, even in civilian world, in the business world, you can't just explain every fucking mini detail to people. Just please do this. And we can talk about it in a month or whatever. You have to do this though. This will really help us move everything forward. Go get it done. It's those kind of things. That's submitting to your example of the submission to leadership. You give your opinion at the time, 40 times you said, which I know you're just saying that number, but you gave your opinion to protect the guys, what you felt like was right thing. But the leadership who knows a little bit more than you is no, trust me, that this is it. We have to do this. Whether you agree with it or not, this is happening. Right. Yeah. And then it's just all right, I'll go pass it on. Then you pass it on. And then that guy fucking doesn't like it, goes back to, oh, fuck it. It's actually the immaturity level. So you were mature enough to accept this, whether you wanted to or not. Yeah. And then you go down to the lower maturity level of leadership, who's what the fuck is happening? And they just make up scenarios in their heads. And then it's you don't actually fucking know anything. I do want to
offer you something about that, James.
Being comfortable in ignorance is something that's interesting, but go ahead.
Yeah. So comfort in ignorance, and ignorance not as a bad term, but as reality.
No. Yeah, I didn't mean it as bad either.
Right. And the lower you are in any franchise of any kind, the more ignorant you are to reality. And so my offering has always been the message itself. And in the structure we have, the lieutenant happened to be my age, but had only been in for a little while. I had already been in for like 10 years.
Right on.
So you have this, that's part of why we were our marriage of leadership, he and I. But the head of household I submitted to, right? But I still speak up. And like, I expect families to be that same way. You speak up. But the question is, when you go tell the kids, if you will, and not children, but when you go tell the juniors, they are so capable and intuitive that if you aren't a fucking salesman about the mission, they know who won the conversation. So in business and in war, I leave that room and I don't even mention the lieutenant's name. I just say, we're doing X. I told you to go do Y. I told you to go do Z. Why aren't you fucking doing it? And it's not a matter of the lieutenant said, the general said, the president said, mom said. It's no, I'm telling you. And so there are ways that if you really manage that properly,
exactly right,
you account for and manage ignorance through salesmanship and ownership. So when I look at Jeff and I say, you're going in that door, bud, it's not, the lieutenant doesn't want you to go in there. I want you to go in there. The only way I win is if I have credibility and trust.
That's right.
Which people thirst for discipline, and discipline can be trusted. Even if you don't like it, you can still trust it. And one thing that they always did, those guys always did what I asked. Those guys never questioned me until they were by themselves, and then they would put bandanas on and uncuff their boots and roll their sleeves, which I told them never to do because of fire. And I know they did some undisciplined shit on their own.
Or hands in our pockets.
Or your hands in your pockets. But the reality of things was, in the biggest picture, if I said do X, they were going to do it. And I always loved them for that discipline. But that wasn't, I didn't make them disciplined. I earned their discipline, you know, but the message happened to be there. Why would they do what I tell them to do if I always told them the lieutenant wanted them to do it?
Yep.
It means I don't trust it. I'm telling you to do what he wants to do.
It also, it's not just that. It also, because it is that, but there's also another caveat here too. It also diminishes you and your leadership, because why aren't you then the one? You're not accountable, right? If you're constantly pointing the fingers at everybody else, then who the fuck are you?
Yeah. And middlemen are useless. Middlemen are time wasters. Like if the message, if I'm not pitching the message the way the lieutenant did, the lieutenant should just talk to them by himself. I'm in the way. I have actually always felt that way.
That's exactly right.
That's been easy for me to adopt, to be I guess once I was in a leadership role, I always felt very comfortable submitting to my officer.
Sure.
But my officer's always made an opening for me to speak up.
Yeah.
With Quist, because he did a lot of one-on-one time with platoon. You know, is that you just stepping aside and telling them like, hey, why don't you fucking tell these guys this?
Do you know what's so? No, I never said that. I never said, why don't you tell these guys?
Yeah.
I did have conversations like that with him. We had they were never heated because we felt the mission the same way.
Yeah.
But if I'm in an organization, the commander that said that families sacrifice more than the person who dies, that commander is a communications officer. He's a colonel now. He's so capable. I was a sergeant major. He was a lieutenant colonel. We had something really bad happen, and there were accusations that one of our female leaders was a rapist. And there are anonymous ways that troops can report their feelings or opinions about things called the Any Mouse box. And we found this letter in this anonymous box challenging us for letting a rapist serve in a leadership position. She wasn't. She had been investigated for something. She was fantastic. No immorality, but unethical. So she didn't do anything immoral, but it was fraternization. It was unethical. Okay. The troops were kind of revolving around this concept and started to post things about staff non-commissioned officers, leadership in the Marine Corps, being allowed to get away with things and all this other stuff. So it's like, okay, we have to solve this leadership conundrum and reestablish faith in the decision makers for the commander. In order to do that, we had to violate the privacy of the female. And we were within our legal allowance to do so. Okay. So for quite a while, I'm having a conversation with this commander about the 600 people who we have to talk to clarify this rumor problem. And in those moments, I tell the commander my opinion. I wrote down all the facts. I wrote down how I think it should go, da, 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 da. And then I said to him, and he's extremely comfortable and prefers to be the voice in front of his troops. I said to him, sir, I really feel compelled that you should let me do this. I didn't tell him why I thought that yet. I just said, why don't you let me take care of this? I think I can message this well. I have all the facts. I've already drafted this stuff. I feel good about it. He allowed me to do that. I asked him to let me do that to absorb how everyone would feel about the commander if he said it. Mm-hmm. If he isn't the one to violate some individual privacy, he still has command authority and presence. If I do it, they can think I'm the asshole, but still listen to the boss. Okay. Right. So there are tactical ways to employ your advisors. If I go out and do this thing that's going to make people unhappy, they can complain about me. And they did officially. And I was investigated for it. No problems because it was good. But the commander wasn't investigated, even though I told all the troops, the commander is allowing me to give you this information. Boom. No one complained about the commander. Mm-hmm. They complained about me. Okay, that was a worthy thing. That's me submitting to the command, not the commander, but the mission. So now, Jeff, you're asking, why were there times when Lieutenant Quist was with you by himself? Because he's the commander. And because I wanted to make sure that all of you knew that that's your commander. You do what you want. In other times, if the commander is with you and I'm the problem, if I'm not there, you're not worried about what I'm hearing you say to the commander. So I unburden you of my judgment so you can talk to the commander. Those things are necessary for a good team because everything you said to Lieutenant Quist when I wasn't there, I knew within 10 seconds. And everything he said to you, he had already asked me my opinion of it.
Yeah.
So this is one of those places where that good, solid team ethic, the discipline was there because we were tied at the hip. And even when I disagreed, I submitted because that's my job.
Yeah.
To subordinate my opinions and myself to the mission, not the commander. Okay. Totally separate conversation. Eventually, there's a book called The Courageous Follower that talks about how I have the moral obligation to follow really well. And we never talk about being a good follower. We only talk about leaders.
Mm-hmm. If you look into ancient times, they actually did say that the greatest leaders were the best followers.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And for us, the greatest leader is the first follower. The first person to adopt the good thing and go with it. The leader's crazy until he has a follower. The first follower is the one who drags everybody with him. So if Lieutenant Quist says he wants to do this crazy thing, and I'm like, hey, boys, let's go. Now we have a mission, not some lunatic. Pretty awesome.
Gotcha. Okay. Fucking weird seeing everything like this.
Is it? I appreciate you, Jeff. This is beautiful for me to talk about because sometimes you want to tell folks who might have an opinion of you the reality of what happened.
Yeah.
Or why things were the way that they were. But you don't want to go out and do it because then it kind of feels like you're just trying to justify all your actions. Mm-hmm. Instead, in this environment, you are liberating me for Jeff to ask questions and not me stick up for myself, but just say, hey, this is what happened. And I think it's really beneficial for both of us.
Yeah. Fuck yeah.
What do you think, James?
I think this has been a masterclass in a few things, honestly. There's a lot of teaching around leadership. There's a lot of teaching and understanding of the importance of failure and how it actually helps you become a better leader if you allow yourself grace and forgiveness, no matter what the action, whether you kill a civilian's life, which you openly shared with us, which I think is critical to talk about, right? And you understood that in that killing, it was a miscommunication. You knew it was a justified shooting. However, it was also a sad outcome, right? And you give yourself grace on both accounts. And I think that can be carried into many other facets of life as well. And it's something that that forgiveness, that accountability, that grace, fantastic. I think the leadership aspect of things, I love, I understand everything you just said very, very well and intrinsically, because I'm a leader, right? Like I'm the leader of an organization right now. And I constantly am having the first follower thing is
Yeah.
actually something that I never really thought of it that way. And it's difficult if you have a first follower who follows, but only kind of. And then
Yeah.
it's like, wait a second, what's happening? And it ends up diminishing trust with the rest that come in,
Yeah.
right? And it looks like a crazy person potentially when it's that was brilliant. But even the concept of going to the aircraft were inbound. That
Yeah.
was a great
Yeah.
story and a great teaching for even the ignorance, again, not in a negative way, but just the ignorance of the young soldier, which then leads into, or not even just young soldier, just young person, just young
Oh,
in general, right? Like a child or a new employee or whatever it might be in civilian world, right? Like, or in everyday life. That example of aircraft inbound is a perfect example of the importance of going back to it, the trust, the first follower, and how important they are to make sure that everybody else is following in line. So you will put the guns down and you will just listen to that later. And then your understanding from that leader of saying just aircraft were inbound. And he probably didn't say it like a dick. I wouldn't, I would imagine it was very professional. It was just like
yeah.
aircraft were inbound.
Yeah.
And then you're just like, oh,
And he didn't even
oh,
need to reference what it was from, you
nothing.
know? Yeah.
You knew.
Yeah.
And then you fell in line. You
Yeah.
fell in line and you made sure you were better in the future, and you were.
That
So
changed the rest of my career
that
for
is
sure.
absolutely fantastic, that
Yeah.
intuition. I think communication, we talked a lot about communication today as well.
Yeah.
Of course, that's critical, but communication, I feel like people misunderstand that a lot too. I really want to point this out. Communication isn't over communication. It's just saying exactly what needs to be done and not necessarily, and then we'll say, well, why am I doing this? It's like, listen,
Right.
we don't have time to talk about this right
Right.
now. We may never have the time to talk about this.
Or you do it 20 years later, 12 years later.
Right. Exactly. But do the fucking thing, right?
Yeah.
And then it's like, got it. And then you just go. So good. But that again goes back to the first follower. It's so critical.
Yeah.
It's so critical and important. So I today's conversation so far, because I really want to get a little bit more, some more things I want to ask you about.
Okay.
But so far, this conversation has been wonderful. I think it's been it's very engaging. We're telling some hard truths. Another
Yeah.
thing I
Yeah.
love was about the stop telling
Yes.
soldiers that everyone's gonna fucking come home.
Right.
Stop doing that. You're setting up failure for. And I'm curious when that narrative actually started to be perpetuated or perpetuated through the military.
It's not.
What,
Sorry.
that's
It's not. It's perpetuated in the highest forms of leadership where people actually understand resources. So Sergeant Major's E9, highest enlisted, and
yeah.
I would work for typically commanders of fairly large units. Officers go through lots of training where the art of war and the strategy of war is discussed from a resources perspective and the application
Logistics
of
wins
rounds
wars. Yeah.
right? The problem is the majority of conversations don't happen with them. The majority of conversations happen in those lower middle management positions where you're trying to influence actual tactical action.
Mm.
And although some general may be giving you a brief before you actually go into battle, he's not in those moments. The general's not telling PFCs stuff about tactics. He's trying to build your belief that it's time to go. He's not boiling down those things. I mentioned the book Warfighting briefly. It's a very small book, MCDP1, Marine Corps Doctrinal Publication 1, Warfighting, our founding document on conducting war.
Yeah.
It talks about fear, chaos, uncertainty, fog, all of these things that are going to come. If you never read that book and you went to war, you would experience all of those things for the very first time. But if you read it and you're familiarized with it, and then I train that into you, and then I insert fog of war, and I insert uncertainty, and I take away your comfort, and I do all that knowing you're supposed to survive my training, then war isn't an introduction to that. It's a more visceral, extreme version of what you've already lived through. So it's not so much of a shock. That's something that is not happening extremely well. And I think that's not happening extremely well because we are very worried about individual feelings. We are very worried about whether or not you want to be here. We're worried about retention. We're worried about whether or not you're comfortable. And that keeps people in service who want their GI Bill. It doesn't keep people in service who want to wage war. And so sometimes we need to have these deeper conversations with younger leaders who say things like, I really appreciate that you're here today. You're a valuable member of my team. If you don't come home, I'll be sad, but good. Did we win? And so my last 5 years was, I love you. And it's on my plaques. I tell everyone, I love you. What you are willing to do is astounding to me. And I love you for the sacrifice you're willing to make. But I don't necessarily, if you care, if you don't come home, did we win? You shouldn't care if I don't come home.
Let's go,
Did
baby.
we win? And the only reason I started being so bold about that was because of the experience of failure when you're told to bring everybody home.
Damn fucking right.
And
that,
so,
yeah. Bro, listen. So that is the thing. Okay. So if you have a culture, we agreed on this before we even fucking started. We have a culture in the United States of the reason why that just got me fucking pumped up is because the rest of the world looks at America. I actually heard it when I was in Ireland at one point too. Somebody said it not directly, but it was a citizen of Ireland said it to me. It was like, you guys are basically just concerned with winning and all this pressure and stuff. And I'm just like, in my head, I didn't really respond. I was very professional and whatever.
You kind of have to be.
Yeah. But in my mind, I'm like, yeah, fuck yeah. Well, of course I want to win. Of course I want to build something that's great. Of course I want to help. I want to bring value to people, right? There's a concept there that breeds better cultures and societies overall. We have a society of individuals that should be told that they are more capable than what they believe. Right.
Yeah.
That is.
And that your discomfort is worthy because the discomfort creates growth for you to, if you don't lose sometimes, how do you expect to be any better than you are today? If you don't suffer sometimes, how do you? Yeah. I'm sorry, James, go ahead.
100%. No, that's 100%. And it allows us the freedoms that we gain, but it starts, by the way, big time when we're young with the narratives that we tell ourselves, even from leadership perspective, the society around you. So because again, we're literate creatures, we eat words. So if the words being told to us all the time is victim ridden, then of course you're going to have a weaker society, and your soldiers and your military and things like that are going to begin to slowly crumble, right? Getting comfortable with that failure is insanely important. Go ahead, Chris. Go ahead.
Well, in that same vein, when everyone's merit
baby, hell yeah,
is washed down because everyone is recognized.
Yes.
And there's a really cool video. There's this little league baseball coach who said, hey, if your parents said come out here, it doesn't matter if you win or you lose, your dad's a loser. We're gonna win today.
That's right.
And it's because the merit is necessary, and we are not all the same.
That's right.
And although you may get a participation trophy, when you are young, you should be admired for taking the risk.
Damn right.
But you shouldn't necessarily be told you are just as good as this person in that skill. You have value, you have work, and I love you. But that was not very good. And I think we can do better. You want to try again tomorrow? That is development.
Right.
And we don't do that to each other.
Or let's find the thing that you're good at and let's really drill into that.
That's right. And then strive for success in those things that,
absolutely. And I don't, living in a dream world where I'm a professional baseball player. I'm not. I'm fucking right here talking to you, Chris. I'm not a professional baseball player.
Right.
I can't live in a dream world where don't live in another, live
Yeah.
right here, provide value to the community around you, find
Yeah.
that skill. That's also, interestingly enough, that is a Christian value too, where it's like find your gifts and then show it to the world.
Yes.
Right? Like that is a beautiful message. That is
But
a
find your gifts.
empowering
Don't make
message.
everybody give you the gift you want.
Right. Exactly.
So I think
Find
that's
it.
part of this.
That's
Like,
exactly right.
if I want to be such and such a thing and I'm not good enough, I'm not authorized to demand that everybody bend so that I have value in this thing I'm not actually good at.
Correct.
Find your gift, not demand everybody recognize a gift you don't have. I
That's
think
right.
that's a struggle for me too.
Yeah. I really, I find that to be so powerful, especially going back to it. That's just like going to that military mindset of like, look, not everybody's going to be, you have to prepare the person for the ultimate potential, bad thing that could happen is someone's dying under your command.
Yes.
However, it's not necessarily, it doesn't mean you failed. Right.
Right. It is an unfortunate reality
Yeah.
of the purpose you serve, but you have to submit to that reality. And that I need to take a quick break, but my offering is nobody is willing to submit anymore because
Yeah.
submission is a bad word in society today. When in reality, submission is a beautiful thing because it denotes trust. It
Yes.
denotes unity. It denotes this idea that I see something big. I will subordinate everything I am for what I believe is valuable. I'm not
Yes.
valuable. This is valuable. I'll take my value. I used to, I got in a lot of heat for this, but I would frequently tell non-commanders, mostly
Mhm.
enlisted, but some non-commander officers, hey, like, just a reminder, you're a fucking nobody.
Yep.
What? You are no one. You are access to effort and resource. You and
Sorry about that.
although you have value, when you sometimes you have to use these really harsh things, just like the one guy, you got to stop drinking, buddy. Some people can hear that, some people can't. Some
Yes.
people can hear you say, hey man, the officer is responsible and you need to give him your support, attention, and message.
Yep.
Some people can't hear that. They need to be reminded, who the fuck do you think you are? Right? And the average citizen who has value needs to be reminded, you are not America. You're a facet. You are not the Marine Corps. You're a facet. You are not responsible for this. You're responsible to someone who's responsible for this.
Yes.
We are just so bad at submission. Submission, like discipline, is also liberating if you believe in the purpose. And
Yes.
so, again, gentlemen, I'm sorry. I need a quick break. I'll be right back.
Take a
Is that
quick
okay?
break, man. You're good.
Awesome. Thank you.
Jeff,
Yes.
what's going through your head right now? What are you thinking about this so far?
It's really, like I said, it's really weird, man, you know, to see my war from a different perspective.
Fantastic.
You know, I mean, in the beginning, we really understood what the mission was, but like, it's the reality, you know, that we didn't see because we were young. You know,
It's
luckily,
unbelievable.
you
Growth and
know,
maturity brings a lot.
yeah, and you know, I think that like I look at it now, and I look at my old platoon commander as well. You know, he's still fucking he's still a badass leader in the Marine Corps, but you know, with Chris's experience before he came to us is what shaped our platoon commander at the time. Because remember on my podcast, you asked me about leadership in the military between officers and enlisted.
Yeah.
And I said to you that I believe that officers are very book smart. I think the success of great officers is good enlisted. So, and I mean, like, you know, the
Hold that
conversation.
thought for 1 second. I'll be right back.
Okay. So, how's everybody doing today? Guess his dog's probably fucking off.
Nah, we're good. We're good. This is an intermission point anyway. But the reason why I asked you to hold on a second is because I'm grabbing my Nordic Spirit Frosty Berry that I got in Europe. So I'm going to throw a little nicotine pouch in
Oh,
because this
very
is
well.
a quick break waiting for Chris to get back. But, there's something else I want to say. Actually, I want to challenge you because now I'm also very grateful that we have a leader of his caliber on right now. Because what I've noticed, my intuition is showing me something different because I interact with officers a lot. Actually, I'm going to I was invited to a commander's house actually for like a little get together and everything like that. And on at JBMDL, there's commanders that are having like a thing at one of their houses. So anyway, I'm going over there. I'm going to hang out with them, talk to them. What I found is something. I actually think it's levels of maturity actually as well with leadership between officers and lower ranked enlisted. I don't know if it's book smart necessarily, because usually what comes with that is they don't know how to communicate with people. I find it completely different. I find a lot of the higher ranking individuals, lieutenants and up and everything, even though lieutenants are also young, not all of them can communicate well. I'm not standing up for them and all whatever. Just hear me out. So I do find them to be able to communicate very effectively the facts, which is what you talk about when you say the books. And they have to do it that way because they cannot move off mission all the time. There was a guy, there was an officer that Dan and I had the pleasure and the honor to be able to work with. Lieutenant Colonel Josh Crockett, stud. The dude was a stud. He wasn't a Marine though. He was in the Air Force. So, and it is different. I'm not talking shit on the Air Force at all when I say my next statements at all. Okay. So the Air Force does have, in his position in the unit that he was running was an office-based position. He could look out for his guys a little bit differently and he could talk to them differently. And he took advantage of that. And he liked being able to do that in a position for, I imagine, for an infantry officer. Okay. It is different. The tempo is different. It is 24/7 and you are constantly on and you have to make damn sure your guys are fucking trained up. So they are absolutely lethal and they know how to actually take care of themselves and the guy next to them. And that is, dude, critical. And that isn't the feelings are super manipulatable, right? Facts, not right. So that's why when you marry the two too often, actually, if you marry feelings into a very very reality-based mission in the infantry, you actually begin to weaken your infantry if it's too emotionally focused. Because what happens in my view, intuition-based here, and correct me where I'm wrong, but the infantryman's officer has to make sure that his Chris over here is absolutely lethal as fuck so that his guys following him can also be lethal. They need all the bullets. They need all that information that you were feeding them is critical to winning the entire war or the battles within the war, right? Because to me, that is not an emotional place, especially because if one of your guys gets hit, you can't mourn that person right there. If they die next to you, I imagine that that's a point where you're like, fucking A, what are we evaluating here? What are the facts around us? You're not worried about feelings. You're sad. Of course, you're going to get hit with sadness. And some guys might break down and they're having that emotional response of crying. Now you have to worry about that guy. And that's not talking shit. They're crying.
No.
Right? I'm not right.
Well, here's a really good example of that. Gavin was injured and he passed on the aircraft on the way to treatment.
Yeah.
But there were many folks injured in the same IED, improvised explosive device blast.
Yeah.
And this lovely guy, John Bewley, was the squad leader at the time. He was a squad leader because his squad leader was just laced in shrapnel and got sent home. So, by virtue of loss, he was fleeting up into new positions. And it is not with judgment, but I vividly remember with a cold heart yelling at him on the radio to stop talking, write it down, and call me back. He's trying to tell me that he needs an aircraft. Like, okay, I know you need an aircraft. I can work on the aircraft. Stop yelling into the mic
Yep.
Collect your information, fight your fight. Casualties are second. That's hard to manage people's feelings with that.
Yes.
Casualties are not your priority. The enemy is the priority. Kill the enemy, and then I'll talk about an aircraft with you.
The enemy is priority, and the men fighting the enemy that are alive are priority.
Priority, yes.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
the,
I hear that.
the healthy shooter
Hell yeah.
is not a healthy medic until the shooting is done.
Mm.
Or until you manipulate the space to make providing care safe. But that's another hard thing. You're not bringing everybody home, number one. And in operations in urban terrain, especially confined battle in buildings, if you are injured in front of me, I step over you. Like, people don't gather or understand when you talk about feelings getting involved, feelings get a lot of people killed. Because if you're down in front of me, it is my absolute obligation to kick you out of my way and keep going.
Uncontrolled feelings.
You must circumvent there's a lot of feelings about who serves what gender in what role. Feelings start to come into play, and if someone is hurt in front of me that is a female, if I don't train really, 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 really hard to ignore my innate obligation to help the people who are less capable than me, it's possible that if I'm not trained properly, I could go to the less wounded person because of my feelings and how I was raised, for instance. That's extremely possible. So instead, like, I have to train myself. It doesn't matter who you are. If you fall in front of me and the gunfight is still going, you're actually an obstacle, which is really hard to say about another human. When you talk about the fact and the feeling, the fact of the matter is there's a gunfight going on. The feeling of the potential loss of your teammate has to be overcome for the mission. And we do not train that well. Well, I think we train it okay, but it's hard to understand until you have to do it. When you leave someone bleeding to keep pulling a trigger, that is exceptionally uncomfortable after the fact if you're trained well, because you'll just do it. And when you look back at it, it is exceptionally uncomfortable to recognize that you just...
I imagine that is exceptionally difficult. I
So
imagine that.
Now, I just want to put, now from my perspective of that day, okay, when after the IED had gone off, we did start getting shot at, but everyone's emotions started coming in close. And I remember Quist and Bewley. I mean, Bewley just, he just went straight to Gavin right away.
Yeah.
Quist was really the one on riot control, because we were taking pop shots right after the IED had gone off, and we came running in, and you see Tyler friggin', with his friggin' throat ripped open, and from shrapnel and all this other stuff, and it's funny because when you look back at it, I wanted to help.
Yes.
But I had to, like I said a while ago, we had to get fire superiority back with half a squad.
Yep. Yeah.
So,
to put some perspective, James, there were 5 casualties immediately out of probably 12 people on the ground.
Yeah.
Maybe 16 with the Afghan troops that were with us.
Yeah. Yep.
Sorry, Jeff.
We just had to get it back, and it's whoever was next up, let the corpsman do his work.
Yeah. And those corpsmen have to deal with that too, by the way. We had just gotten a corpsman that week, and we almost immediately sent him back.
Yeah.
And
he couldn't handle it.
He could, and that's not a judgment of him. It is that intense,
Yeah.
And so I really do appreciate those things, because the feelings can absolutely impede and interrupt the requirement. And I'll just keep coming back to welfare and morale. If you're trained so well that your feelings can be put on hold because your response instinct is kicked in, you're going to make it okay. People will die, but your likelihood of being able to make it skyrockets, because the reality of the problem is not how you feel about the loss of life. And to be really clear, some of the feelings I had, whenever there were feelings, were typically personalized. I had, these stories sometimes feel outrageous, but they are. I put an indicator on my head so my machine gunners could keep firing at one point because the poppy was so tall and enveloping fire, two different elements firing from different directions to put the enemy in a bind. My machine gunners stopped firing because they couldn't see us anymore because the poppy was so tall. So I took a bright orange panel out of my pocket that I used to mark IEDs or aircraft, and I put it in my helmet so they could see me and they could start shooting again. And that meant I was up front. Everyone's was like a step or two behind me, but the machine gunners could keep shooting so that we could continue to move against the enemy. And a bullet went through my sleeve and snapped my sleeve, and the guy next to me saw it, and I'm like, this happened twice where I had a bullet go through. Well, third time I was actually shot, but I had a couple of bullets go through my gear. And I vividly remember feeling like, why me? Which is a crazy feeling, because why me is the first thing to, this is wrong, and now I should stop. That's when, why me is when humanity starts to sneak in, right? And I vividly remember a couple of times a bullet snapped a branch in front of me, and I looked at my corpsman, Aaron Rogers, one of our corpsmen, and said, why are they picking me? And I, without real feeling, but not knowing where you are, and all these things get kind of weird. For that half of a second to 2 seconds, I was endangering the mission.
Oh yeah.
And that's the definition of feelings versus reality. And where are you living in that moment? And if you're trained well enough, you can avoid that feeling sneaking up and taking hold. It's going to come.
Hold, right?
It's coming.
Yep.
But can you reduce its impact on your actions? That's the stoicism. Like the life of the Stoic deserves that. I did not always do that well.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
That is a great example to bring it back to the question of enlisted officer and like the reason why, or just higher ranking enlisted as well, included with officer, of that book smart and that not book smart, which means I imagine when you say that, Jeff, the way I interpret that always is the being able to communicate and shoot the shit with the Joes and just hang out with the guys and like that kind of thing. And it's like, well, I can't do that because there's a mission at hand. We have to stay focused, and it's moments like that really the guys are looking to you. How are you going to respond, Chris? Yeah. Right. And you're going to keep going. And then the guys get to keep going too.
Another reference you're absolutely right, James, that no doubt about it, because the action will speak louder than any experience or education. Generally speaking, when you hear an enlisted human say they're book smart, we're offering that officers have better education and training than we'll ever have, because that's true. And so Lieutenant Carl Quist brings education and training. I bring less education and training, some. In that era in the Marine Corps, we were starting to align, and I had to go through very, very similar training to what he had to go through, but not for the same amount of time. Also, responsibility makes people act differently. He was responsible for everything. Yes. I was supporting his responsibility. So that helps too.
Yes.
But the experience I brought to his education and training and authority, that team, I think that's what Jeff was referring to. It's books versus experience. I was also liberated to be closer by virtue of not being an officer, but I was not close to them like that. Frankly, I did everything in my power to be a little bit kind of like off-putting. I would actively flip the bird at them in jest, right? But every now and then it was one of those things like, hey, go hang out with your guys. It's not I'm better than you, but I've got mission planning to do with the commander. Or I just want to be alone.
Yeah.
And then you need to build camaraderie with your folks, because I'm not your teammate. I am your mission mate. I'm not your teammate. I'm your leader. Those are hard places to live, because you're also not the lieutenant's teammate. You're his subordinate. And there's these really weird positions you can get into when you're one of one and the lieutenant is one of one. You inevitably build a relationship that I talk to him all the time today. But that book smart / education training, and then the experience of 10 years and many deployments, you put those together and you get CEO and COO.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's the relationship of a lieutenant and a staff sergeant.
Yeah.
COO, CEO, the officer. Because the operations of the thing. How
totally
we
understand even better now. Totally understand even better now.
Now, I think that's a good way.
Yeah. What is the, so I want to get into something you brought up. You don't struggle with, the military side of the house. Like you didn't really struggle with that. It was really a lot of the relationship based stuff for you. And you were having a rough time mentally for a little while. And because what we've learned so far is the discipline really helped you avoiding the discipline and the morals and ethics that your mother gave you actually helped you avoid a lot of the potential
combat
stress that you would experience that would lead to potential PTSD and nightmares, things like that guys struggle with, which actually does fall in line, quite honestly, with a lot of other people who don't suffer from post combat related stress or PTSD.
I believe they are directly correlated.
Yep, I completely agree with you.
Pre-work determines your sleep.
Totally agree with you.
No doubt about it.
Cannot agree. I cannot agree more. But there was a time that you were struggling, and what we try to do here, so we learned a pathway before, and even actually a pathway to how to get out of it so far, kind of. How did you get yourself out of that place? Or are you still in it sometimes, and do you still struggle with it? And if you do, how are you managing it?
That's a great question. I imagine a lot of people struggle with this. You do intakes when you go to talk to my very first counselor was a social worker, and you kind of do intakes with your therapist, so they get a written background in essence to kind of like help set the stage for how they're going to support you. So it's late 2019, early 2020. I'm in the 39, 40-year-old range. I'm, 18 years into a relationship, 15 years married with a daughter. I've left the infantry world, and now I'm in a different advisory type role. I had been for a little while, but it was starting to come to terms that I was no longer a shooter and I was a supporter. I think that's happens to everyone when they get out of service, when they leave certain jobs. Like when you transition from what you feel your purpose is, there's a form of loss associated with going into that new world.
Big time.
I think that in conjunction with some relationship stuff, when I wrote my experiences so far and why I was seeking counseling, the very, very first thing the social worker said was, well, you obviously have PTSD. So, and I didn't even hear the rest of what she said because I was so deeply offended. At that point, I think it was like 6 combat deployments. I had been wounded overseas before. I had talked about the loss of troops, and she couldn't see beyond those things to read what I wrote, where I was concerned about my communication with my spouse and leading my daughter. I didn't feel like my spouse and I were on the same page in leading our daughter. And I was absolutely not comfortable with our relationship because I just felt like a roommate with this extremely faithful spouse, a good human, but I was not her like person anymore for quite some time. Right. So I'm struggling with this. And I say I don't have any struggles with combat as far as stress is concerned. That's true. But what it took through therapy and some conversations was, where in the relationship did stuff start to break down? Because the majority of that breakdown happened in association with my time with Jeff. So, okay, well, now we need to get to like the reality of things. I want to know more about my youth and my suffering then, if there was any. I want to know more about how my mom suffered and what she went through as a single mother. And then the addition of my dad, who did great things to help us and love me well. Like, where in there am I struggling with relationships? And some of the reality was, although I don't wake up sweating at night thinking about bodies, I cannot have, at the time, I could not have good deep conversations because I would start to get offensive, direct, uber confident in my position. And I would be almost abusive in how I would control a conversation.
Mm.
And so it would take time for me to realize that is the result of hypervigilance, always aware. I have a solution for everything. I don't want to necessarily hear how you feel. I'm going to solve how you feel. Like these things that become this dominant but not courteous partner, right? And
Yes.
so I would demand and direct and take charge and whatever else, but I wouldn't take a few moments to truly understand the other person's position.
Yes.
And that happened up until probably a year and a half ago. So this is 15 years of that. In total, maybe 4 years worth of some type of counseling. And it took me lying to a few counselors before I found someone that was offering me worthy stuff. And this is not, for me, it was extremely important that we uncover all the options prior to medication.
Yep.
So how do we talk through this? What kind of partners? And I did couples counseling with my ex-wife specifically for co-parenting, those types of things. And even now I slip and I become aggressive with her because I just don't like what she's doing. I don't like how she's parenting, for instance. Doesn't mean she's wrong. I just don't like it. So I think those are actually tied to combat. They're tied to my desire for control. They're tied to my desire to take responsibility because it's just what I do. And frankly, it's what that's what you do. That's why you have this organization you lead.
Yes.
It's my purpose to safeguard, guide, and take responsibility.
Yes.
But that doesn't always suit my constituents well.
Exactly.
Right?
There is a difference. And I'm happy this is actually coming up because there is if with a child, right? There has to be they are their own person, even though they're your child, they are their own person. You do have to understand what they're trying to get through, right? What they're trying to find in their own lives and who the person that they want to become instead of what you want them to become. And there is a direct difference between, even though that's very important skills to have, you being able to directly communicate things like that. But there's also that balance of, that's when the feelings do come into play, right? That's an appropriate place for feelings to come into play. Is hey, all right. Why are you doing it this way? What are you thinking? How are you feeling about this? What's going on? I want to understand you. How do we find a good medium ground? That's negotiation. You have to learn to negotiate with your partner and your spouse well.
That thing you just said is how it ended for me, was finding a partner who had the skills to actually talk.
So important. Especially, by the way, I want to say something about you real quick, especially with you, because it's not that you're domineering. It's actually because full transparency. I resonate with you a lot personally because I have a very similar mind. We're very logical people. And if you aren't saying something that can defeat my logic, I'm not going to allow it to happen because it's just not beating it. Right. But you did it a couple of times during this episode where you're like, oh, thank you for that. That was good logic. That's a good word. That's good phrasing. You are capable of the submission, right? You are capable of it. You better fucking prove to me that you're capable of making me submit.
Yeah. My problem is when I do that with people who don't
respect.
Well, I respect all of them. Where I have failed in my communication with partners is I don't acknowledge that some of the offerings they make in the conversation are purely their feelings. So I counter how they felt about it, meaning their perspective.
Yes.
With that didn't happen. That's not that. Or I say things like, oh, well, I've been holding on to this for a long time. You feel this way about that? Well, I haven't told you how I felt for the last 2 months. So
Yeah,
here it is.
that's not
And then
good.
I'll be like, because
That's a fight.
that's where and then that person feels unheard.
Yeah.
So, and I went from a relationship where I would say, I'd like to talk about this thing, and we wouldn't talk.
It builds resentment.
And it was so bad. It was so bad.
Yeah.
And then I went into a relationship where we would always talk, but that conversation was always feelings. And those feelings, when I brought up my feeling, not the logic, when I brought up how I felt about it, I was sequestered. Primarily because I would bring it up in response to her frustration.
Feelings are what's interesting about the feelings conversation is it is almost like a money negotiation or a contract or whatever. Whoever puts the price out first might be hurting themselves. You have to make sure that you're putting out a good price because that's setting the standard for where you're talking from. Yeah, and that's manipulatable. So that's why it's so difficult sometimes to deal with it and to talk to it with logic. Where instead, if it's like, all right, let's talk about those feelings. I'm down for it. We can talk about the feelings and see why you feel that way. And then, hey, let's get to the point though, where we can talk about some of the things that happen. But I am curious about the feelings that you do have in response to what happened. Yeah. That's very, very difficult.
And when you're particularly frustrated, you aren't trying to build that kind of a conversation. You're trying to be heard, right?
Yep.
So now we come back to the mental health side of things, specifically professional health. I stopped going to therapy type, counseling type things in my last relationship as my last relationship was deteriorating. And through the experiences of my first relationship, my failures there, my partner's failures, my second relationship, which felt significantly better because at least there was engagement, but it wasn't always healthy and I was not always supportive. And now I've forwarded into this new relationship I've been in for a year with someone who she and I had similar times in relationships where she would want to speak up and the partner would walk away.
Yeah.
She would never be able to voice those things. So I'm going through counseling and therapy. Some of it's couples where someone is trying to mediate and support. And I still don't feel heard. Every time I talk about how I feel, I'm kind of like told I'm ignoring how the other person feels. It felt just very odd. I think counseling is very, very beneficial for some, but I would offer kind of to the stoic point before our live. I haven't gone to seek any additional mental health services since my last relationship. And instead, I found a human being that speaks more logically, that offers how they feel without making it an attack.
Yeah.
This is what I'm experiencing. You did X, I feel Y. Okay. That's like a logic path that I can partner with.
That I can track. Yeah.
Yeah. It's also the first person I've ever said, you're doing X, I feel Y. And she said, I'll stop. And I was dumbfounded.
Yep.
That I offered what I thought, and she didn't say, stop being insecure.
Yeah.
He said, I understand. I won't do it.
Yeah. I have that in my partner as well. She's fantastic for that. It is actually the most important thing in the world to be able to voice it in a, I don't like to use this phrase, but it's really the only phrase to use. It's like a safe relationship, like it's
to feel heard.
Yeah.
To feel heard and not just be told what I'm doing wrong. But when I offer that, I think
and then diminish you at the same time. Yeah.
One of my key issues was kind of accountability and safety of my partner during a long distance relationship. When she would go out with her friends or not, I don't really care. I just want to know you're home. You're in California, I'm in North Carolina. Just tell me you're home. I wouldn't get that. And I would bring it up and kind of be told that it's not that important. Yeah, but here I am offering the effeminate version of how I feel in these moments. I can tell you what it does to me. I'm telling you how I feel about that thing, and you're disregarding it completely.
Yep.
Or maybe you accept it, but you're not changing anything.
Yeah.
You know, I can say something and you not modify your behavior. I'm still not heard. It was odd how I needed that even as a man.
Yep.
And if I tie this back into the mental health thing, I stopped going because I didn't need it because my surroundings were better.
Yes.
And so when we talk about the stoic or we talk about mental health or any of those things, I champion people's desire to begin some sort of treatment.
Yes.
But I also say, what's the plan?
Yes.
Okay.
How are
You're
you
going to
going
talk
to
to
get better?
somebody.
How are you going to think for
Yeah.
yourself? How are you going to get out of it?
Yeah. And not to
Yes.
be too trite about it, but like, cool, you're going to therapy. What's your goal and when is it over?
Yeah.
Not even like, what do you want out of it? But I don't want you to go talk to somebody every 2 weeks for the rest of your days.
Yeah, that's not
not
it.
health. And frankly, if we're not careful, that will just be your vent ground. And now we don't have communication. So
It's
it
exactly
doesn't work
right.
for me. So my offering is like, use that mental health. I'm glad it's there. And anyone should feel empowered to do that.
Yes.
But the goal should be not going anymore.
That's right. I
Because you
totally agree
develop,
with you. I totally agree with you.
that's it for me, James.
I actually I do find it to be it's almost like when you outsource all of your thought, what are your own thoughts?
Yeah.
Right. And I do. Now, there's very small cases, just to save for anybody that listens or anybody that is listening, because that is the statement that you made and that I'm agreeing with 100% can be seen as like super polarizing, whatever.
Sure.
But you're misunderstanding something. I'm sure that there are people out there who do need therapy for the rest of their lives. I'm sure there are, right?
As long as there's evolution.
But I bet most don't.
I doubt that well, I don't doubt. I would imagine it'd be difficult to need 40 years of therapy and actually need it if you're growing and evolving.
That's exactly right. I
don't know
agree.
that for sure, of course, but it's just hard for me to imagine that you started therapy for something. And if it's effective and valuable, maybe you're in it for a long time. But if you're talking about the thing you were talking about 20 years ago, I don't find value in it.
Yeah.
If you've grown from that thing and now you've identified this new causative effect or symptom or concern, and you want to evaluate how to better manage that thing, cool. And then for a period of time, you do that and you evolve into the next thing you want assistance with.
Yes.
I find that to be fine. I also believe if we had a better connection to the people around us, which I'm not good at, if we had a better connection to people around us, we wouldn't necessarily need that.
Right. Sure.
And maybe that connection is your faith, your family, your partner, your best friends, colleagues, mentors, mentees, and not people who think the way you think, but people who love you enough to tell you reality.
Yes.
I don't need a therapist if I have a friend who tells me maybe you should drop him.
Yes.
That's where I am now.
You know what it is? Actually, a good analogy for that is I needed a doctor. I needed a pediatric care doctor.
Yeah.
Right. And then I need a midlife, primary care provider. And then maybe one day, hopefully not, but maybe one day I'm going to need to have a doctor that serves me for curing me from cancer or something like that. Right. Like there's different points in your health journey in your life. You're going to need different types of doctors and people that you're talking to, right? Like geriatric care and such. Right. So like they're the same thing with mental health. It should be treated like a genuine, like, all right, I'm getting treatment for this right now, and then I'm out. And
I
I'm
break a
good.
bone, there's a plan. I have a traumatic issue, there's a plan.
Yes.
Each of them have health as the future.
Yes.
But when I break a bone and you put a plate in my arm, my capacity to use that has to change.
Yes.
Just like when I get hurt in my mind and you help me rebuild,
yes,
the effect is still there. The consequence still has evidence that it happened, but my purpose is not to be in therapy. My purpose is to be healthy.
Yes.
I go to therapy to gain health, not to gain someone to talk to every day.
Yes.
And that can be polarizing, especially when you're talking to someone you love who enjoys the therapy, who feels good after therapy, and you say, "Okay, when are you going to stop going?"
Yeah.
But I'm not saying stop going. I'm saying when will you accomplish your mission?
Yes.
That's a tough one.
Completely agree with that. I know some psychologists and social workers who actually agree with that as well. And actually, very surprising to me, there's been a few there's actually quite a few VA individuals now who are in mental health in the VA who are saying those kind of things too. Like, hey, like these guys keep coming back constantly. Like, how can we help them move their lives forward? They don't have to come see us as much or at all. Like,
resources. If you talk about resources, we're taking 20 years of veterans from war who are joining the previous elements of veterans who have that kind of experience.
Yes.
At what point will we exhaust our resources and people who can provide counseling? You'll either degrade the value of the counselor.
Yes.
Or you'll have to hyper train all these folks to meet the demand that we are going to create because of the number of people who've been at war in the last 20 years.
Yes.
Or you not solve the problem, but you heal the hurt, right? Like, okay, broken leg, go to ortho. Broken heart, go to, it's called BHIP now, Behavioral Health Integration Plan.
Yeah.
It's like, here's all these things that go into you not needing me anymore. My goal in behavioral health should be working out of a job.
Yep.
I'll never lose my job because there'll be new people.
Of course.
But the people I'm working with right now, I need them to
lose
not
a client. I have to lose a client.
If I'm a great therapist, I need high turnover.
That's right.
But
that's
with
exactly
success
right
rate on the back end.
Of
right?
course. Yeah. That's exactly right, though. That's exactly right. High success rates. People are getting out. You know, they don't need to come see me anymore, kind of thing. I went to a therapist for like 4 times, and the 4th time was we talked for like 2.5, 3 hours, and at the end of it, he was like, "Listen, I don't want to fucking see you here ever again." He's like, "Dude, He's like, I've never met somebody who's able to actually go through their emotions so well and be able to gain learnings out of it." He's like, "You just need to trust yourself." And I was like, "Bet, I'm out."
And like good mentors around you. You need a good sounding board.
Yes.
You feel safe with what you're doing. You feel confident with what you're doing.
You know what I need actually most? I can tell you what I need personally. I heard this quote one time, find people that move bricks with you. Not the people who just stand around and watch. I need people that want to move bricks, right? I need my spouse, my partner to be that way. I mean, for example, her name is Lisa, by the way. Lisa started her own fucking psych practice and she's crushing it right now.
Awesome.
She's like the trending fucking psychiatrist practice in Philly right now. She's a top trending one. And it's just like, unbelievable. Like, you're killing, like, keep going, like, move bricks, right? We sit down together, we talk together, we're able to talk about very difficult things and subjects, and she can keep up and she can give me feedback back, I give her feedback back, like, it's very much we're moving bricks together. Everything in my life, if you're not moving bricks, it's hard for me to understand why you can't move bricks. Right. Like,
it's hard for me to continue to support you not moving bricks.
Yeah, because you're not even
really difficult.
I give you the tools to move the fucking bricks, move the bricks when you said you wanted to move the bricks.
And I can love you as a citizen and as a fellow man.
Absolutely.
But sometimes if I'm always hearing all the bullshit in your life and you're not making any effort to make it better, it's just kind of like, I will support you, I'll love you, and my phone number won't change.
That's right.
Dude, you gotta come on, man.
We gotta move.
And sometimes it takes 10 years, like Jeff said, to finally come to a place where all you can think about now is quote unquote moving bricks.
That's right.
Jeff, you're like moving things, doing things, making new things every day. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. But I'm not saying you shouldn't go to therapy. I'm saying the goal should not need anymore. And I feel very confident that the things I need when I'm hurting exist now in my daily life, not someone I have to visit every 3rd Tuesday of the month.
That's exactly right. That's exactly
right. I believe that should be the mission.
Think for yourself is the mission. That's right. I love it. Listen, this has been absolutely fantastic. This whole conversation. I would love to have you back at some point. We can continue having conversations and talk about hard subjects and topics. And Chris, absolutely a pleasure. Thank you so much, Jeff. Really, really great recommendation. This was fucking
Miss you, Jeff.
huge.
Miss you big time. All of our guys.
Yeah, this was cool. So thank you everybody for tuning in with us. And yeah,